She pointed at him like he was garbage. In front of 40 executives on the 73rd floor, Evelyn Cross, billionaire, untouchable, feared, jabbed her finger 2 inches from Noah Mercer's chest and said, "Get out of my building, janitor." He didn't flinch, didn't blink, just looked at her with eyes that had seen things she couldn't dream of. And that's when her entire empire started to crack. Drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels. If this hits you the way it hits me, subscribe and stay with us, because what Noah does next, nobody saw it coming. Noah Mercer woke up at 4:47 in the morning, same as always, 13 minutes before his alarm. He didn't need the alarm anymore. His body had been trained too well for that years of discipline that never fully left, even after everything else did. He lay on his back for exactly 30 seconds, staring at the ceiling of the small apartment on Delancey Street, and then he was up. No stretching, no groaning. Just up. The apartment was quiet in the way only pre-dawn apartments can be, that particular stillness that belongs to no one, not day, not night. He moved through the kitchen without turning on the overhead light, knowing every inch by touch and memory. He filled the coffee maker, pressed the button, and stood there in the dark, listening to it begin to hiss and drip. On the refrigerator, held up by a magnet shaped like the state of Texas that he'd never once been to, was a drawing. Crayon on construction paper, the kind they hand out in 2nd grade. A man and a little girl, both with yellow hair, because Emma always gave them both yellow hair, even though Noah's was somewhere between brown and silver these days. She'd written underneath in careful, uneven letters, "Daddy and me." He looked at it for a moment, then he poured his coffee. The commute to Cross Tower took 42 minutes on the subway, then 7 minutes on foot. Noah had it timed so precisely that he could calculate his arrival to within 90 seconds on any given morning, accounting for platform delays and the light at the corner of 5th and Madison that always ran long. He wore his uniform gray shirt, gray pants, the name patch on the chest that said Noah, in block letters, the small logo of the building services company stitched on the sleeve. The work boots were his own, not issued. 13 years old, resoled, twice broken, in past the point of discomfort, into something closer to a second skin. Nobody on the subway looked at him. That was fine. He was used to being furniture. Cross Tower was one of those buildings that announced itself before you arrived, 73 floors of glass and steel that caught the morning light and threw it back at you like a challenge. It dominated the midtown skyline with the kind of confidence that only obscene money could buy. The lobby alone was bigger than Noah's entire apartment block. Marble floors, cathedral ceilings, a reception desk staffed by 3 people in matching blazers who smiled with their mouths and not their eyes. Noah entered through the service entrance on the east side. He always did. The freight elevator was slower and smelled like machine oil and yesterday's takeout. And it was the only one he was cleared to use unless he had a service call on one of the executive floors. That was fine too. He wasn't there for the view. His supervisor, Dale Briggs, was already in the maintenance office when Noah arrived, a small, cluttered room in the building's basement that served as headquarters for the entire facilities crew. Dale was 58, had a gut that strained his company polo, and had worked in building maintenance for so long that he sometimes talked about boilers the way other men talked about old friends. "You're 3 minutes early," Dale said without looking up from his coffee. Elevator ran fast. Mercer. Dale did look up then. He had the expression of a man who was about to deliver information he'd rather not deliver. "We've got a situation today." Noah poured himself a cup from the communal pot, which was terrible, and had been terrible every day for 3 years. "What kind of situation?" "The 73rd floor. Cross herself is in today, came back early from Singapore apparently. They want the whole floor swept before 7:30. You're on that detail." Noah paused with the cup halfway to his mouth. "The 73rd floor. I know, but Rodriguez called out sick, and you're the only one I trust not to break something or say something stupid up there." Dale pointed at him. "You keep your head down, you do the work, and you get out. You hear me?" "I hear you." "I mean it, Noah. The woman fired a facilities guy last year for making eye contact. I'll manage. Dale looked like he wanted to say more. He didn't. Evelyn Cross had been the subject of 3 separate magazine cover stories in the past 2 years. Fortune had called her the most feared woman in American business. Forbes had put her net worth at $4.2 billion. Wired had done a profile under the headline, "She Doesn't Lose." She was 44 years old, Yale-educated, and had taken her father's mid-sized software company and turned it into a global technology infrastructure firm with contracts in 17 countries. Cross Systems handled the digital backbone of banks, hospitals, government agencies, and private corporations across 3 continents. When their systems worked, nobody noticed. When they didn't, economies trembled. Evelyn Cross had not built that empire by being gentle. She arrived at Cross Tower at 7:08 that morning in a black car with tinted windows, moved through the lobby without breaking stride or acknowledging the 3 reception staff who greeted her by name, and stepped into the executive elevator. Her assistant, a young woman named Priya, who had not yet learned to eat lunch before noon, followed 6 inches behind her, with a tablet already reading from it. You have the board call at 8 Singapore debrief at 9:30. Move the debrief to 8:45. That overlaps with the Henderson. Move Henderson to 11. What's the status on the Meridian migration? Still on schedule according to IT. The server transition is set for. Tell them I want a status report on my desk before 8, not a projection. Actual numbers. Priya typed something. Yes. Also, facilities has a crew on the floor this morning. Evelyn's eyes didn't move from the elevator doors. I don't care about that. Of course. The elevator opened onto the 73rd floor. Noah was on his knees behind a workstation near the east window when he heard her arrive. He wasn't hiding. He was tracing a cable that had been reported as intermittently disconnecting, one of those small, nagging problems that building systems developed over time, the kind that drove IT departments crazy, and that Noah had a talent for finding. He'd already found the issue, a connector that had worked itself loose from vibration, and was in the process of securing it when the voices came down the hall. He didn't look up. He just kept working. The 73rd floor was the executive level, all glass-walled offices, clean lines, expensive furniture, the kind of aesthetic that said, we don't make things here, we decide things. The facilities crew wasn't supposed to still be on the floor past 7:30. Noah had 6 minutes. Who the hell is still up here? The voice was sharp, clear, and carried the particular edge of someone who considered unanswered questions to be personal affronts. Noah heard heels on marble, fast, purposeful. The kind of walk that expected everything in its path to move. He was rising to his feet, reaching for his kit bag, when she rounded the corner. Evelyn Cross was smaller than she appeared in photographs. Not short, but precise, as if she'd been engineered for efficiency rather than presence. She wore a charcoal blazer over a white shirt, dark slacks, hair pulled back. Her eyes were gray, and at that moment, they were fixed on Noah with the particular expression of someone who has just found something unpleasant in an otherwise clean space. Behind her were 3 people. Priya with the tablet, a man in a suit who Noah would later learn was Harrison Webb, Chief Operating Officer, and another man whose name tag identified him as the floor supervisor for building services, a young guy named Travis, who looked like he wanted to disappear into the carpet. I asked a question, Evelyn said. Noah straightened. He held his kit bag at his side. Cable repair on workstation 7. Intermittent disconnect that was causing... I didn't ask what you were doing. I asked who you are. Her eyes moved to his chest. Noah. She said the name like she was reading a word in a foreign language, curious, slightly contemptuous. Why is there still a maintenance worker on my floor? Travis stepped forward too quickly. The movement of a man trying to absorb a blast before it reached someone else. I'm sorry, Ms. Cross. He should have been done by... I wasn't asking you either. She hadn't looked away from Noah. Do you have somewhere else to be, Noah? There was a particular tone people used in that moment, The slight emphasis, the pause before the name, the implication carried beneath the words like a current. Noah had heard it before. In other contexts, in other lives, it had preceded considerably worse things than a dismissal from a corporate floor. He looked at her, level, unhurried. "I was finishing the repair," he said. "The repair." She glanced at the workstation behind him, then back. "One of my engineers couldn't figure out why Station 7 was dropping connections. You found it." "Loose connector on the secondary line. Should be stable now." Something moved in her face, not quite surprise, but a recalibration, the almost imperceptible adjustment of someone who expected less. It lasted about a quarter of a second. Then it was gone, replaced by something harder. "Well?" She stepped to the side, clearing the path behind her. "Then you're done. This floor is restricted access after 7:30, and I don't have time for—" She looked at him again, that brief evaluating glance that managed to be simultaneously dismissive and total. "This." "I'm aware of the restriction," Noah said. "I have 2 minutes." The COO Webb made a small sound, something between a cough and a laugh, quickly suppressed. Priya's eyes widened almost imperceptibly. Evelyn Cross went very still. It wasn't the stillness of shock. It was the stillness of someone who had just heard something that didn't compute, who was running it back to make sure they'd heard it correctly. 2 years of magazine covers, and 44 years of being the most capable person in every room she'd ever entered, had not prepared her for a maintenance worker in a gray uniform who responded to dismissal with a polite and utterly unbothered statement of fact. "Excuse me," she said. "You said the floor is restricted after 7:30. Noah glanced at his watch, a plain digital one. Nothing fashionable. "It's 7:28. I have 2 minutes. The silence that followed was the kind that has weight. Then Evelyn Cross said quietly and precisely, "Get out of my building." Travis was waiting for Noah at the freight elevator, looking like he'd survived a natural disaster. "Are you insane?" he said, his voice dropping to a hiss as the elevator doors closed. Noah set his kit bag down on the elevator floor and checked the connector tool in the side pocket. She said 7:30. It was 7:28. "That's not you can't just do. You know who that is?" "Evelyn Cross, CEO. She fired Marcus in accounting for sneezing in a meeting she was—" "That one I think is exaggerated." "Noah." Travis pressed his back against the elevator wall. "Dale is going to hear about this. Probably. And you're calm." Noah looked at him. He had the expression of someone who had at various points in his life faced things that recalibrated what calm meant. Travis, who was 26 and had worked in building services for 11 months, did not have the context to understand that expression. He just found it unsettling. "I'm calm," Noah said. "The repair is done. The floor is stable." The elevator descended. Dale was not calm. "I told you," he said for the third time, pacing the small maintenance office, with the energy of a man who had been told his blood pressure should not be elevated. "I specifically told you. Head down, do the work, get out." "I did the work." "She called building services. She wants you off the contract." Noah absorbed this. He was sitting in the plastic chair near the wall, coffee cup in his hand, looking at a fixed point somewhere near Dale's left shoulder. "Okay. Okay." Dale stopped pacing. "Noah, this is the Crosstower contract. Do you understand what that means? This is 40% of the company's revenue in this district. If she pulls the hull, she's not going to pull the contract over a maintenance worker who answered her question accurately." Noah took a drink of the terrible coffee. "If she does, that's information worth having about what kind of person she is." Dale stared at him. "Sometimes," he said slowly, "I forget what you used to do, and then you say something like that." Noah said nothing. "What did you used to do?" It wasn't the first time Dale had asked. It was a question more people had asked over the past 3 years. Men and women who had seen something in Noah's manner that didn't quite fit the gray uniform and the kit bag, a way of moving a quality of attention, an unhurried confidence that didn't come from building maintenance. Noah always gave the same answer. "I worked for the government," he said, "a long time ago." Dale waited for more. It didn't come. It never did. The phone on the desk rang. Dale answered it. His face changed. He held the receiver out toward Noah with the expression of a man who has just been handed something he wants no part of. "It's for you," he said. "It's her assistant. She wants you back on 73. The second time Noah stepped off the elevator onto the 73rd floor, it was 11:14 in the morning, and something was clearly wrong. The floor had the particular energy of controlled panic people moving fast, and not in coordinated ways. The sound of competing conversations, someone's voice raised behind a glass wall. Two men in IT shirts were speed-walking toward the server room at the far end of the floor, one of them carrying a laptop open in both hands, like an offering. Priya met him at the elevator with none of the composure she'd had that morning. "Thank you for coming," she said, and she seemed to mean it, which surprised him. "What happened?" "The primary server cluster on this floor, there's been a cascading failure. Started at 9:50. It's affecting the Meridian migration and 3 other active contracts." She was already walking fast. "Our IT team has been on it for over an hour." "What's the nature of the failure?" She glanced at him. "I'm sorry. Software-hardware network configuration. What have they ruled out?" Another glance, this one longer, recalibrating. They haven't told me." "Okay." Noah walked. "Is the failure contained to this floor's cluster, or is it affecting the main building systems?" Just this floor as far as we know." "Then it's not infrastructure. Where's the server room?" She pointed. The server room at the far end of the 73rd floor was not actually a room. It was more accurately a reinforced closet, with serious intentions, a compact but sophisticated local cluster that handled processing and data management for the executive floor's operations. It was the kind of setup that cost several $100,000 and was managed by people with advanced degrees and certifications. 3 of those people were currently standing in front of it, looking the way people look when they are very smart and very stuck. The lead was a man named Chen, early 30s, rumpled the pallor of someone who'd been staring at error logs since morning. He looked up when Noah came in, registered the gray uniform, and turned back to his screen. "We don't need facilities up here," he said. "She asked me up," Noah said. "For what?" "The air conditioning." "Chen." Priya's voice was careful. "Ms. Cross asked him specifically." Chen turned back. His eyes moved to the name patch, then up to Noah's face. He had the expression of a man who has been awake since 6 in the morning, dealing with a crisis, and has no patience for whatever this was. "With respect," he said, "I don't know what a maintenance worker is going to contribute to a—" "What's your error signature?" Noah asked. Chen blinked. "You've been running diagnostics for over an hour. What's the primary error signature, the one that keeps recurring?" A beat of silence. Chen's colleague, a younger man, early 20s, named Park, looked up from his own screen with something that might have been curiosity. "Error 0x80070079. Chen said finally, the tone of a man who expected this to mean nothing to whoever he was talking to. "Timeout on remote procedure calls. It's affecting the sync across the cluster nodes." Noah nodded slowly. "RPC timeout. Are the nodes all showing the same timestamp on the failure, or is it sequential?" The younger man. Park sat up straighter. "Sequential," he said. "Node 3 went first, then 5, then—" "Park." Chen's voice was a warning. "It went sequential starting with node 3, Noah said. Park looked at Chen. Chen's jaw tightened, but he didn't repeat the warning. He was looking at Noah with an expression that had shifted not to respect, not yet, but away from pure dismissal. "Yes," Chen said. "Why?" Because if it were a software failure, the timestamps would be near simultaneous across the cluster. A bad update hits everything at once. Sequential with 3, as the origin means it's not the software. It's physical. Noah looked past them at the rack. When was the last time this cluster had a physical inspection? That's not relevant. When? Chen and Park exchanged a look. 6 months ago, Park said. Standard maintenance cycle. Okay. Noah took a breath. You have a bad capacitor on Node 3's power regulation board. Or you have a failing connection on the backplane between 3 and 5. Either way, it's hardware, not code. He looked at Chen. You can keep diagnosing in software for the rest of the day and find nothing, or you can let me look at the board. Evelyn Cross came in when Noah had the Node 3 panel open. He knew she was in the room before she spoke. A shift in the ambient energy, the subtle recalibration of everyone else's posture that announced the presence of someone who held power over them. He didn't look up from the board. Someone explained to me, she said in a voice of absolute quiet, why the maintenance worker has his hands in my server cluster. Ms. Cross, Priya started. He identified the likely failure point, Chen said. Noah could hear the cost of it in his voice, a capable man acknowledging something he hadn't wanted to acknowledge. Hardware, not software. He may be right. A pause. Then, he may be right. I am right, Noah said. He found it as he said it, a capacitor on the power regulation board of Node 3, visibly damaged, a faint scorch mark on the board around it, that you would miss on a software diagnostic screen. But that was immediately obvious when you held the board in your hands. He held it up toward the light, turned it so the overhead lights hit the damage. There, he said. That's your failure. The silence in the room was different from the silence on the floor that morning. That one had been charged with confrontation. This one had a different quality, the silence of a room where something has shifted. Evelyn Cross crossed the space in 4 steps and stood beside him. She looked at the board, at the scorched capacitor, at the clear physical evidence of exactly what he'd said. She looked at it for a long time. Then she looked at him. "Who are you?" she said. And for the first time that day, Noah let himself look at her directly. Not defensively, not submissively, just straight on man to woman, one person to another. "I already told you," he said. "I'm Noah." Her eyes stayed on his for a moment that lasted slightly longer than professional distance would suggest. Then she looked away, back at the board. "Fix it," she said. "I'll need a replacement capacitor. Your IT team can source it. It's standard. 40 minutes once you have the part." "We have the part," Park said from behind them, the eagerness of a young technician who had just watched a diagnosis get made that would have taken his team another 6 hours. "I'm pretty sure we have it in the supply room." "Then get it," Evelyn said, not turning around. Her voice was still flat, still controlled. But something in it was different. Noah looked back at the board and didn't say anything else. Behind him, Chen was already moving. Emma Cross, not Cross, he reminded himself. She was Emma Mercer, always. Mercer, her mother's name had been different anyway. Emma Mercer was 7 years old and had been practicing her recorder part in the 2nd grade spring concert for 3 weeks. Noah knew this because she told him every night at dinner, unprompted, with the particular urgency of a child who has decided that a thing is important and needs the adults in her life to understand its importance. "It's the hard part," she told him on the phone that afternoon, her voice thin and precise through the speaker as he waited in the cross-tower corridor. "The part where it goes up and then down fast. Ms. Pettigrew says I'm one of the only ones who can do it." "I believe her," Noah said. "You're going to be there, right? Not anxious?" Emma's voice didn't do anxious a quality she'd inherited from somewhere, though Noah was still working out exactly where. More like confirming a logistical detail. "You said 6 o'clock. I'm going to be there, 6 o'clock. Promise. Promise." He hung up and stood in the corridor of the 73rd floor of Cross Tower, 42 floors above Midtown Manhattan, with server components in a Ziploc bag in one hand and his phone in the other. The clock on the wall said 2:17 p.m. He had 3 hours and 43 minutes. He kept his promise. But what happened in those 3 hours and 43 minutes? The thing that Evelyn Cross saw. The thing that changed the equation on the 73rd floor of that building in a way nobody had prepared for. That is a story for what comes next. Because some things don't end with a repaired circuit board. Some things are just beginning. The replacement capacitor was the size of a thumbnail. Park found it in the supply room in under 4 minutes, breathless, when he returned, holding it out like he'd run a relay. Noah took it without ceremony, sat back down on the floor in front of the open rack, and went to work. Chen stood behind him, not hovering, more like a man who had decided he needed to understand what he was watching. His arms were crossed, his earlier hostility not entirely gone, but restructured into something more complicated. Somewhere between professional skepticism and the particular discomfort of realizing you've been outpaced by someone you'd dismissed in the first 30 seconds. "Where'd you learn hardware repair?" he asked. His voice was neutral, conversational almost. Noah didn't look up from the board. "Same place I learned most things. Which is necessity." Park made a small sound, something between a laugh and a cough. Chen shot him a look. Park found something fascinating on his laptop screen. The repair itself was precise, methodical work, the kind that required both the right tools and the kind of patience that can't be faked. You either had it or you didn't. Noah had it. His hands moved with an economy of motion that Chen watched despite himself, the way you watch anyone do something difficult and make it look obvious. 11 minutes after he started, Noah seated the new capacitor, reattached the board, and closed the panel. He stood, picked up the damaged component, and held it out toward Chen. "Keep this," he said. "Show it to whoever does your next maintenance cycle. They'll want to check the adjacent boards when one goes. The stress pattern usually flags 2 or 3 neighbors." Chen took it. He turned it over in his hand, looking at the scorch mark. Then he looked up. "You said it was hardware before you touched it," he said. "You diagnosed it from the error signature. Sequential failure starting at a single node. That's not how software behaves." "Most people wouldn't know that." "Most people aren't paying attention," Noah said. He picked up his kit bag. He looked at the clock on the wall. It said 2:41 p.m. He had 3 hours and 19 minutes. He nodded once at Chen, once at Park, and walked out. He almost made it to the elevator. "Mr. Mercer?" Priya's voice came from down the corridor, quick and slightly strained, the voice of someone who has been asked to deliver a message they're not entirely sure will be received well. Noah stopped. He didn't turn around immediately. Just a half-second pause, the calibrated pause of a man who has learned that the quality of your response to being called back often matters more than the response itself. Then he turned. Boy, Priya was coming toward him at a pace that was technically walking, but only barely. "Ms. Cross would like to see you, in her office." "I have somewhere to be at 6. "It's not yet 3. Noah looked at her. She had the expression of someone delivering a message she was required to deliver, regardless of the response, professional to the bone, but with a faint tiredness behind the eyes that suggested she'd had a long day starting at 7:08 that morning. "Okay," he said. "Where's her office?" Evelyn Cross's office occupied the northeast corner of the 73rd floor, glass on 2 sides. The city spread out behind her like a map of everything she owned or was in the process of acquiring. She was standing when Noah came in, not behind her desk, but at the window, her back to the room, her hands clasped behind her. She didn't turn when the door opened. "Sit down," she said. Noah didn't sit. He stood near the door with his kit bag and waited. She turned after a moment. She registered that he was standing. Something shifted in her expression, not irritation, not quite. More like a woman recalculating the terms of a situation she thought she understood. I said sit down. I heard you, Noah said. The silence lasted 4 seconds. He counted them. Why? Then Evelyn Cross did something he hadn't expected. She almost smiled. Not warmly, the expression didn't have warmth in it. More like the involuntary acknowledgement of someone who has encountered something they find genuinely interesting despite themselves. She walked to her desk, sat down, and looked at him across the room. You just fixed a server failure that my IT team couldn't identify in 90 minutes. Chen's team would have found it. It would have taken longer. Why are you defending them? I'm not defending them. I'm being accurate. She studied him. The gray eyes hadn't changed, still sharp, still evaluating. But the quality of the evaluation was different now. Earlier that morning, it had been the automatic assessment of someone who processes people by category. This was something more specific. Where did you work before this? She said. Government contractor. Before that, military. Which branch? Army. Specialty. A beat. Communications and systems, among other things. Among other things. She repeated it the way you repeat a phrase that you've identified as carrying more weight than it appears to. What other things? Things that aren't on a resume. She looked at him for a long moment. Outside the glass behind her, the city did what cities do, moved and glittered and paid no attention. How long have you been in building maintenance? 3 years. Why? It was the most direct question she'd asked, and the one he'd been most careful about in the past 3 years whenever someone with enough curiosity got around to asking it. It was a question that had a real answer and several acceptable substitutes, and he chose his words with the care of someone who has learned that the way you frame a truth matters as much as the truth itself. My daughter needed stability, he said. Steady hours, same address. A father who came home every night. Evelyn Cross said nothing for a moment. Her expression didn't soften exactly. She wasn't that kind of woman. But something in it shifted some small recalibration. How old is she? 7. Her name? Emma. He wasn't sure why he answered that. He didn't talk about Emma to people at work. He was careful about the wall between his daughter's world and whatever professional world he occupied at any given time, a habit from before, when compartmentalization wasn't a personality trait, but a survival skill. But something in the directness of the question had bypassed the usual caution. He'd answered before he'd decided to. Evelyn nodded. Then, I want to offer you a contract. Noah blinked. He kept it internal, barely a change in his expression, but it was there. What kind of contract? Consulting. I have a technology infrastructure crisis happening right now that goes beyond a server room capacitor. The Meridian migration, you heard it mentioned. It's a $70 million contract with 4 deliverable milestones in the next 6 weeks. My IT team is competent. They're not seeing what they need to see. She paused. You saw it in 12 minutes. I saw a hardware failure. That's different from... You diagnosed it from an error signature, she said. You knew what questions to ask. You asked them in the right order. She leaned forward slightly. What's your current salary? He told her. She wrote a number on a piece of paper and turned it around on the desk so he could read it. The number had commas in it, multiple commas. Noah looked at the number. He looked at it for exactly as long as it deserved, long enough to register what it represented, not long enough to let it rearrange his face. That's for 6 weeks, she said. I understand what it is. Then what's the hesitation? He looked up from the paper. I have a daughter who has a school concert at 6 o'clock tonight. I have a supervisor I respect who I'd need to talk to before I committed to anything. And I have a question. Her chin lifted slightly, not defensiveness readiness. The posture of someone who was accustomed to questions being a preamble to negotiation. Ask it. This morning you told me to get out of your building. This afternoon you're offering me a 6-week contract. He held her gaze. What changed? The question sat in the room. He'd asked it the way he did most things quietly without performance. But it had an edge to it, and she heard the edge. She could have deflected. She was good at deflecting. 44 years of practice, a boardroom full of people who'd tried to corner her with harder questions than this. She had 17 different ways to redirect a conversation without the other person knowing it had happened. Instead, she said, "I was wrong this morning." Noah waited. "I assessed you by what you were wearing," she said. "That was a mistake. I don't make it often. I don't like that I made it today." She said it flat clean, the way you state a fact. Not apologizing exactly, but not performing the statement either. She meant it. He looked at her for a long moment. 6 weeks, he said. "My hours are flexible in the day, but I'm done at 5:30. Every day, I'm done at 5:30. "That's not how consulting—" "That's how I consult," he said. "My daughter doesn't negotiate her dinner time." Something moved across Evelyn Cross's face that might, in another woman, in another room, have been the beginning of a smile. It came and went too fast to be certain. "Fine," she said. "And you treat Chen's team as colleagues. They're good. They needed one piece of information they didn't have. That's not incompetence." Her eyes narrowed. "You're negotiating terms of how I manage my staff." "I'm telling you a condition," Noah said. "I won't undermine a team that was doing its job. I'll work with them, or I won't work here." The silence that followed was the kind Evelyn Cross normally used as a weapon, long enough to make most people uncomfortable enough to walk something back. She'd perfected it over years, the loaded pause, the evaluative quiet. Noah stood in it like it was nothing, like he'd stood in much worse. "All right," she said. "Agreed." He nodded. "I'll talk to Dale today. I'll be here at 8 tomorrow morning." 8. She said it like the time was a minor concession. "One more question." He paused at the door. "You said you worked in government, communications and systems." She was looking at him with the focused attention of someone who has decided to look at something directly. "That doesn't explain how you knew the error signature. That's not communications work. That's deep system architecture." "No," he said. "Then what is it?" He looked at her from the doorway. "It's what happens when you spend 15 years making sure the systems that keep people alive don't fail." He held the doorframe. "I'll see you at 8. He walked out. Behind him, Evelyn Cross sat at her desk and looked at the door he'd closed, and she had the expression of a woman who had started the day certain about a great many things and was ending it considerably less so. The clock on her desk said 3:04 p.m. It had been a long morning. It was about to be a longer afternoon. Because what Noah didn't know, what nobody on the 73rd floor had told him yet, was that the capacitor hadn't been the real problem. It had been a symptom. And the actual failure, the one buried 3 layers deep in the Meridian migration code, was already spreading. It announced itself 11 minutes after Noah stepped into the elevator. "Debts." Park's voice came over the floor's intercom system with the controlled urgency of a young technician trying not to sound like the world was ending. "Chen, we have a secondary cascade. Nodes 7 through 12. It's not hardware." Chen, standing at his workstation, with the damaged capacitor still in his hand, said a word that wasn't appropriate for professional environments. Then he picked up his phone. Down in the lobby, waiting for a cab that would take him to the subway, that would take him home to Delancey Street, where he'd shower and change, and make it to Emma's school by 5:50 at the latest. Noah's phone rang. He looked at the screen. Unknown number. He answered it. "It's Chen." A pause. The pause of a man who found this particular phone call professionally uncomfortable. "The secondary cascade is software. It's deep in the migration code. I've been in this for 2 hours, and we're not finding the route." Noah stood on the sidewalk outside Cross Tower and looked at the stream of cabs moving up the avenue. He checked the time. 3:17 p.m. "What's your error log showing?" "Recursive loop in the data handoff protocol. Every time we try to break the loop, it spawns a new instance. It's like trying to put out a fire that generates fire. Infinite recursion in the handoff. Yes, it's not in the handoff protocol, Noah said. It's in the validation layer underneath it. The handoff is triggering a validation check that's failing, and the fail state is calling the validation again. It's a circular dependency that was dormant until the hardware failure stressed the system. Silence. Then, how do you know that without seeing the code? Because that's how those systems fail under stress. He paused. Can you get me remote access? But another silence. Longer. Chen on the other end of it weighing things. Professional pride. The scope of what was actually at risk. $70 million in contracts. Possibly more. I can get you read-only, Chen said. I'm not giving a maintenance contractor write access to our... Read-only is fine. I'll find it. You make the fix. Why? Noah was quiet for a second. Because it's your system. You should be the one who fixes it. The line was silent for long enough that Noah thought Chen might have hung up. Then, give me 5 minutes. I'll text you the access credentials. Noah put the phone in his pocket. He looked at the cab. He looked up at the building. He pulled out his phone again and dialed a different number. It rang twice. Hello? Hey, it's me. He turned slightly away from the street noise. Ms. Pettigrew, it's Noah Mercer, Emma's dad. I need to ask what time does the concert start exactly? I was told 6, but... 6:15, Mr. Mercer. The doors open at 6, but the kids don't go on until 6:15. A pause, warm and slightly distracted the voice of a teacher managing 17 things at once. Emma has been talking about her solo all week. She's going to be wonderful. She is, Noah said. Thank you. He hung up. Looked at the time. 3:23 p.m. 6:15. Not 6. He turned around and walked back into the building. Dale answered on the second ring, and Noah talked to him straight. No softening, no setup, just the facts in order. Evelyn Cross, the offer, the number on the paper, the 6 weeks, the condition, about the hours. Dale listened without interrupting, which was unusual for Dale. When Noah finished, the line was quiet for a moment. The number she wrote down, Dale said. It had multiple commas. It had multiple commas. Noah. Dale's voice was careful now, the careful voice of a man who respected the person he was talking to and wanted to handle the next 30 seconds correctly. I'm not going to pretend I don't know what you're walking away from if you say no to this. A month of your current salary won't. I know, and I'm not going to pretend this company won't miss you. You're the best troubleshooter I've got, and half my crew doesn't know why, which is exactly how you like it. A pause. Go. I need to give proper notice. I'll handle it. Cross Tower's going to want to renegotiate the facilities contract now. Anyway, she's not going to fire me over losing one guy to her own payroll. He made a sound that might have been a laugh. Go fix her system, Noah. Then go watch your kid play. Thank you, Dale. Don't thank me. Just make sure they pay you what they offered. That woman will renegotiate a handshake if you give her the opening. Noah was already walking back through the lobby. Noted. He rode the freight elevator up. Old habit. He'd probably have to break it now. The thought was oddly uncomfortable. The 73rd floor, when he stepped off it at 3:41 p.m., was a different room than the one he'd left 50 minutes ago. The controlled panic from that morning had evolved into something more focused. The concentrated intensity of people working hard against a deadline that mattered. All of the ambient noise of the earlier chaos collapsed down into the specific quiet urgency of the server room. Chen met him in the corridor without ceremony. I sent the credentials. I got them. Read only. Read only. Noah held up his phone. Walk me through your log structure. Tell me where the migration code lives. They walked to the server room together. Not as adversaries this time. Not quite as colleagues yet. Something in between two men who had gotten past the part where they were figuring each other out and arrived at the part where the work was the only thing that mattered. It took Noah 22 minutes to find the circular dependency. It was exactly where he'd said it would be, buried in the validation layer, invisible, unless you knew what you were looking for. The kind of bug that lived quietly in a system for months or years, until exactly the right stress event cracked it open. He sat cross-legged on the floor next to a server rack with his phone in his hands, scrolling through code logs on the read-only access Chen had given him, and he talked Chen through it, as he found it, not in the manner of someone demonstrating their knowledge, but in the way a surgeon might talk a resident through a procedure patient, and specific, making sure the other person understood not just the what, but the why. "There," Noah said finally. "Line 473 in the validation module. See the return condition." Chen was leaning over his own laptop, following the same path. Park was at his elbow. Both of them were silent, in the way people get when they've been looking at a problem from the wrong angle for hours, and someone has just shown them the right angle. "God," Park said quietly. "Simple fix once you see it," Noah said. "The return condition needs a null check before it calls validation. 2 lines of code." Chen straightened. He was quiet for a moment. Then, "You found it in 22 minutes. I knew what to look for." "I've been in enterprise software for 8 years, Chen said. "I know what to look for." "I didn't see that." Noah looked up at him. "You've been awake since before 6. You've been managing a crisis under pressure from the CEO for 6 hours, and you've been trying to diagnose 2 separate failures simultaneously. Fatigue makes you look at the obvious places. Fresh eyes look elsewhere." He stood. "You're good at this. You just needed the second pair." Chen looked at him for a moment. Then he looked at Park. Then he sat down at his laptop and started typing. "I'll have the fix deployed in 30 minutes, he said, and then without looking up, "Thank you." Noah picked up his kit bag. Old habit again, he'd carried it back up automatically. He set it down near the wall. It felt strange suddenly, the kit bag in this room, like an object from a different chapter that had wandered into the wrong page. "I'll be here at 8 tomorrow, he said. Chen nodded, still typing. Park gave him a look that was somewhere between gratitude and disbelief, the look of a young technician who'd just watched something he'd be telling the story of for years. Noah walked out of the server room for the second time that day. This time, no one called him back. He was through the lobby, through the revolving door, out onto the sidewalk at 4:14 p.m. The city hit him the way it always did, after hours inside noise and motion, and the particular energy of 1,000,000 people pursuing 1,000,000 different things, none of them aware of or interested in what anyone else was doing. He pulled out his phone and checked the time. 4:14. School concert at 6:15. He calculated the route: subway to Delancey, quick shower and change, crosstown to Emma's school. 40 minutes if he moved. He had time. He had time. He stood on the sidewalk outside Cross Tower for one moment, just one, and let himself register what the day had been. The gray uniform, the freight elevator. The woman who'd looked at his name patch like it was a category rather than a name. The server room floor. The number with multiple commas. Mighty, he didn't know yet what all of it meant. He was a careful enough man to know that a single day didn't rewrite anything. Not his life, not his circumstances, not the specific combination of choices and events that had put him in a gray uniform in a basement office on Delancey Street 3 years ago, for reasons he never talked about at work. But something had shifted today. He could feel it, the way you feel the weather changing. Not the storm yet, just the change in air pressure, the specific quality of stillness that means something is building. He started walking toward the subway. Somewhere behind him and 73 floors above, Chen's fix deployed cleanly. Node 7 came back online first, then 8, then the rest of the cluster cascading back into stability, the way it had cascaded out of it that morning, only this time in the right direction. And on the 73rd floor, in the corner office with the glass on 2 sides, Evelyn Cross sat at her desk and read the system status report that Priya had just placed in front of her. Migration back on track. Failure resolved. All nodes nominal. She read it twice. Set it down. Outside the glass, the city was starting its evening transformation, the light going amber and long, the rhythm of the streets beginning to shift from afternoon to dusk. She'd spent 20 years at this window through different offices in different buildings, and she'd stopped really seeing it somewhere around year 7. She was seeing it now. She thought about the man who'd told her this morning with a completely straight face that he had 2 minutes. She thought about the way he'd stood in her office and not sat down. She thought about the number she'd written on the paper and the way he'd looked at it without letting it move his face. She thought about a 7-year-old named Emma who played recorder. She'd had a daughter once. The thought arrived without invitation, the way it always did, sudden and complete and demanding. She let it sit for the 3 seconds she allowed herself, which was what she'd negotiated with herself years ago. And then she put it aside. She picked up her phone and called Priya. "The consulting contract for Noah Mercer," she said. "Have legal draw it up tonight." "Of course. The terms you specified this afternoon." "Yes, and Priya." She paused. "Add a performance clause. If the Meridian migration closes on schedule, there's a bonus." "How much?" She named a figure. Priya was quiet for a moment. "He's going to push back on that," Priya said carefully. "I know," Evelyn said. "Draw it up anyway." She hung up, looked out the window. The city was going gold now, that particular late afternoon gold that New York did better than anywhere else, the light catching the glass of 1,000 buildings and turning the whole skyline into something that looked briefly like it meant something. She had a board call in 11 minutes. The Singapore debrief. The Henderson thing at 11 tomorrow. She pulled the status report toward her and picked up a pen. Somewhere below her 42 floors and a freight elevator and a subway ride away, a man in a gray uniform was going home to help his daughter practice a recorder part. Up and then down, fast. The hard part. She found herself hoping the kid nailed it. She crossed out a line in the status report, wrote a correction in the margin, and got back to work. Emma nailed it. Nailed. The up and then down fast part. The hard part. The part Ms. Pettigrew said only a few of them could do. Emma Mercer hit it clean and clear, and without hesitation, sitting in the 3rd row of the 2nd grade ensemble, in her white blouse, and her hair in 2 braids that Noah had done himself that morning badly. And she knew they were bad, but had not complained about them even once. Noah stood in the back of the school gymnasium with 60 other parents and clapped until his hands hurt. On the walk home, she held his hand and talked without stopping for 11 straight minutes about the performance, about who had missed their note and who hadn't, about the girl in the front row who'd started a full beat early and nearly taken everyone else with her, about how Ms. Pettigrew had said, "Wonderful, truly wonderful," to Emma specifically, and not to the group generally. Noah listened to all of it. He asked questions in the right places. He laughed in the right places. At the corner of their block, she looked up at him and said, "You came." "I said I would." "You always say you will." She considered this for a moment with the particular gravity of a 7-year-old processing a distinction that matters to her. "But you always come, both parts." He looked down at her. The streetlight was doing the thing it did with her hair, sometimes catching it and making it look almost gold. She looked so much like her mother in certain lights at certain angles that it still hit him like a physical thing 3 years later. Probably always would. "Both parts matter," he said. She seemed satisfied with that. She went back to talking about the girl who'd come in early. He unlocked the apartment, made her grilled cheese and tomato soup. Tuesday dinner. It was always grilled cheese and tomato soup. On Tuesdays, she was a child who relied on the architecture of habit, and when she was in bed and the apartment was quiet, he sat at the kitchen table with his laptop and the remote access credentials Chen had sent him and looked at the Meridian migration code until 1 in the morning. Made. He wasn't being paid yet. He hadn't signed anything, but the system was still carrying risk that a 2-line fix hadn't fully resolved, and he knew it, the way he knew certain things not from the logs exactly, but from the pattern of them, the shape of how the failure had moved through the system. The circular dependency had been the symptom. He wanted to find the disease. He found it at 12:47 a.m.
말투자에
He stared at it on the screen for a long moment. Then he closed the laptop, went to bed, and lay in the dark, thinking about how to say what he'd found without saying everything he understood about why it was there. That was because what he'd found wasn't a bug. It was architecture. Someone had built the failure into the system, not maliciously, probably not deliberately, but through a combination of deadline pressure and sloppy abstraction that had left a structural flaw at the foundation of the migration code. The kind of flaw that could stay invisible through testing and soft launches and the first 6 months of operation, and then, when the load got heavy enough and the stress points stacked up in exactly the right way, it would fail. Not maybe. Definitely. And when it failed, it would take everything built on top of it down with it. The Meridian migration wasn't running behind schedule. It was running toward a cliff. He got 3 hours of sleep. At 7:52 a.m., 8 minutes before he'd told her he'd arrive, Noah walked through the front entrance of Cross Tower for the first time. Not the service entrance on the east side. The front. The 3 reception staff in their matching blazers looked up. The one in the center, a woman in her 30s, professional and alert, said, "Can I help you?" "Noah Mercer. I'm consulting for Ms. Cross." She checked her screen. Something moved in her expression, a small recalibration that Noah recognized. The gray uniform was gone. He was wearing dark slacks and a plain white shirt, the sleeves rolled to the elbow. Nothing remarkable, but nothing that said furniture. "Mr. Mercer?" She handed him a visitor's badge. "Ms. Cross's assistant is expecting you. 43rd floor will get you." 73rd, Noah said. Another recalibration. "Of course. The executive elevator is on your right." He rode up in the executive elevator for the first time. It was faster than the freight elevator. Quieter. Smelled like nothing, which was its own kind of expensive. Priya met him when the doors opened. She had coffee, 2 cups, one clearly intended for him, and the particular energy of someone who had been in motion since before 7. "Good morning," she said. "Ms. Cross would like to meet at 8. Chen's team is already in the server room. Legal has the contract ready." She handed him the coffee and the badge in the same motion, the fluid efficiency of a person who had optimized every gesture. "Is there anything you need before?" "I need 20 minutes with Chen before I meet with Ms. Cross," Noah said. "And I need the meeting pushed to 8:20. Priya blinked. Let me check if she... "Tell her I found something last night that changes the scope of what we're dealing with," Noah said. "She'll want the 20 minutes. Priya looked at him. Then she typed something on her tablet. The response came in under 15 seconds. She looked up. 8:20, she said. "Chen's in the server room." Chen was not alone. Park was there, and 2 other members of the IT team, whose names Noah learned in the first 2 minutes, a woman named Reyes, who handled network architecture, and a quiet older man named Voss, who had the kind of unhurried competence that suggested he'd seen a lot of systems fail in a lot of ways. "The fix held overnight," Chen said when Noah came in. His tone was different from the day before, not warm exactly, but without the previous friction. The neutral professional tone of someone who has decided to treat a new variable on its merits. "Nodes are stable. Migration is back on the main timeline." "The migration needs to stop," Noah said. The room went very still. The room went very tight. Park looked up from his monitor. Reyes turned from the rack she'd been working on. Voss, who had been reviewing a printout, set it down. Chen looked at Noah with the careful expression of a man who is deciding whether what he's just heard is a misunderstanding or a problem. "Say that again." "The migration needs to stop, not pause stop. The entire codebase needs to be reviewed before another gigabyte moves. That's a $70 million contract," Chen said slowly, "with a delivery date in 6 weeks. "I know what it is. The failure yesterday was fixed. The system is stable." "The system is stable, the way a house is stable, when the foundation has a crack and you've fixed the window." Noah set his laptop on the nearest surface and opened it. Last night I went back through the migration architecture. The circular dependency we found yesterday was a symptom. The underlying issue is structural. Look at this. He turned the screen toward them. Chen came forward. Voss came forward. Reyes leaned in from the side. Noah walked them through it, the same way he'd walked Chen through the validation layer the day before, patient-specific, making sure they saw what he was seeing and understood why it mattered. He talked for 7 minutes without stopping, and nobody interrupted him, which was its own kind of information about whether what he was saying was landing. When he finished, the room was quiet for a long moment. Voss spoke first. He had a voice like a man who didn't use many words and therefore chose them carefully. "He's right," he said. Chen turned to look at him. Voss. "He's right, Marcus." Voss gestured at the screen. "I've seen this architecture before. Different system, different company, different name on the contract. Same structural flaw. And it failed." He looked at Noah. "When did you find this?" 12:47 this morning. "And you're sure about the failure timeline given current load projections?" "If migration completes as scheduled and goes live at full capacity, you'll have 6 to 8 months of stable operation. Then the foundation gives. And when it gives, it won't be a cascading node failure. It'll be a full system collapse." Park said quietly, "Meridian processes medical records for 11 hospital networks." Nobody said anything for a moment. "Yeah," Noah said. And Chen turned back to the screen. He looked at it for a long time. Then he straightened up and looked at Noah with an expression that had moved fully past the professional recalibration of the day before into something simpler and more direct. "You need to tell her," he said. "I know. She's not going to want to hear it." "I know that too." Chen looked at him for another moment. Then, "I'll back you up in the meeting." Noah nodded. 8:20. The door of Evelyn Cross's office was open when Noah arrived at 8:19. She was at her desk reading something, a coffee cup at her left hand. She looked up when he came in. She was already different from the woman who'd pointed at him like garbage on this same floor 24 hours ago. Not softer, that wasn't the right word. More specific. Like she'd been a generalization before and was now a person. "You said you found something," she said. "The migration needs to stop." She set down what she was reading, looked at him, did not react. He'd expected the reaction most people reacted when you said something that expensive, but she absorbed it with the stillness of someone who had built 40 years of discipline over every instinct that wanted to show. "Explain," she said. He explained it, same as he'd explained it to Chen and the team, but faster. She didn't need the technical scaffolding, she needed the frame and the stakes, and he gave her those without the surrounding detail. He talked for 4 minutes. She listened without interrupting, without moving, with the focused attention of a woman who had made a career of making large decisions quickly and correctly. When he finished, she was quiet. "You found this at 12:47 this morning," she said. "Yes." "You weren't on the clock at 12:47 this morning." "No." "You haven't signed the contract yet." "No." She looked at him steadily. "Why?" He looked back at her. "Because there were 11 hospital networks in the migration specs, and I don't stop working on a problem because my shift ended." Something happened in Evelyn Cross's face. It lasted about 2 seconds. If you weren't watching carefully, you'd miss it, but Noah was watching, and he didn't miss it. It wasn't gratitude exactly, or admiration. It was something more private than that. Recognition, maybe. The expression of someone who has lived by a particular principle for so long that they've almost forgotten other people hold it too. She picked up her phone. "Get me Meridian's CTO," she said. "And get Harrison in here." She put the phone down and looked at Noah. "This conversation is going to be expensive, and it's going to be ugly, and the client is going to push back hard. I need you in the room." "Okay. And I need you to understand something." She leaned forward. "I have never voluntarily stopped a contract migration 3 weeks in. Not once. What you're asking me to do is tell a major client that their 60-day timeline is being pulled that the system they're depending on is structurally flawed and that we need to rebuild part of the foundation before we go another inch. I understand. Do you understand what that does to my reputation in this industry? I understand what it does to your reputation if the system fails 6 months after launch and takes 11 hospital networks down with it, Noah said. That's a different calculation. The silence was long enough to have weight. Then Evelyn Cross said, "Yes, it is." Harrison Webb came in at 8:31, the COO, the man from the day before, who'd suppressed a laugh when Noah had said he had 2 minutes. He was a compact, careful man in his mid-50s who clearly wanted to understand what was happening before he reacted to it, which Noah respected. Evelyn gave him the short version. Noah gave him the technical one. Webb listened to both, asked 3 questions that were precise and the right questions, and then sat back in his chair with the expression of a man doing the specific kind of math that only CFOs and COOs learn to do. The math that involves probability, reputation, liability, and the long-term cost of short-term decisions. "He's right," Webb said. Evelyn glanced at him. "I've seen it in the numbers for 2 weeks," Webb said, and his voice carried the faint discomfort of a man admitting something he wishes he'd said earlier. "Not the technical piece I couldn't have named what Noah named, but the margin projections for Meridian at full capacity had a fragility to them that I couldn't place. This places it." He looked at Noah. "What's the repair window realistically?" 3 weeks minimum, Noah said. "Possibly 4. It depends on how deep the abstraction layers run and whether the issue is isolated to the migration code or whether it's in the original system design. Which means a 6-week delivery becomes a 9 or 10-week delivery. At best." Webb looked at Evelyn. Evelyn looked at Noah. "Can you lead the rebuild?" Noah was quiet for a moment, not hesitating, calculating. He was running the real calculation, the one that had nothing to do with money or contracts or the corner office he was sitting in. He was thinking about Emma's Tuesday grilled cheese, about the school run at 7:50, about the wall between his daughter's world and whatever this was. "Same conditions as yesterday," he said. "Done by 5:30, Evelyn said. "Every day. Every day." She said it without negotiation this time. Clean. "Then yes," he said. The call with Meridian's CTO happened at 10 a.m. Evelyn ran it the way she ran everything, directly, without softening the edges, without burying the information in careful language. She told them what the structural flaw was, what the risk was, and what Cross Systems was going to do about it. Noah was in the room. He answered the technical questions. 3 times the CTO pushed back hard, once with anger, once with skepticism, once with a thinly veiled threat about contract penalties, and each time Noah answered with the same quality of voice he used for everything, even specific and completely unbothered. The call lasted 52 minutes. When it ended, Evelyn set the phone down and looked at the ceiling for 3 seconds, the most unguarded expression he'd seen from her, and then looked at him. "That went better than I expected," she said. "The medical records piece helped," Noah said. "Nobody in that position actually wants to be responsible for a system failure in a hospital network. Nobody with a conscience." "He has one," Noah said. "He was angry because he was scared. That's different from not caring." Evelyn looked at him for a moment. "You read people." "I pay attention." "It's not the same thing." He conceded the point with a small nod. At 11:15, the legal team brought in the consulting contract. Standard format, 2 pages of terms, the number from the paper at the bottom, with a signature line. Noah read it the way he read everything, fully, without skipping. He got to the performance clause, the bonus figure Priya had mentioned to Evelyn the night before, and he stopped. "This needs to come out," he said. Evelyn across the desk, the bonus clause. "Yes. That's additional compensation contingent on." "I know what it is." He set the contract down. "If the migration closes on time and correctly, that's because your team did the work. Chen Vos Reyes Park. I'll help them see what they need to see, but they're the ones writing the code and building the fix. If there's performance compensation, it should go to them. Evelyn stared at him. Webb, who was still in the room, reviewing another document at the side table, looked up. That clause is worth $60,000, Evelyn said. I know what it's worth. You're walking away from $60,000. I'm declining an incentive that doesn't belong to me, Noah said. There's a difference. The room was quiet. Webb set down his document. He was looking at Noah with an expression that hadn't been there before. Evelyn Cross leaned back in her chair and looked at Noah for a long, quiet moment. She had the look of a woman encountering something she hadn't prepared a response for, not because she was unprepared in general, but because the specific thing in front of her operated outside the vocabulary she usually used. All right, she said. The clause is removed. What would you like in its place? The clause goes to your IT team divided equally, if the migration closes on schedule. Done. She said it without pause. Then, anything else? No. He signed the contract, 2 signatures on a clean page. Then he picked up his copy, folded it twice, and put it in his shirt pocket. I'm going to need a workspace near the server room, he said. And I'd like Chen in every technical meeting. He knows this system better than I do. I'm here to help him see it differently, not replace him. I'll have Priya arrange it. Evelyn paused. Noah. He looked up. Why are you doing it this way? She said. It was the same quality of question as yesterday, direct, without framing the question of someone who wanted the actual answer. He looked at her for a moment. He thought about Emma at the kitchen table doing her homework. He thought about the apartment on Delancey Street, the crayon drawing on the fridge. He thought about 15 years of work that had made him very good at very specific things, and had cost him other things that he was still 3 years later in the process of getting back. Because the way you do the small thing is the way you do everything, he said. And I want Emma to see a certain kind of man when she looks at her dad. Evelyn Cross said nothing. He nodded once and walked out to go find Chen. What Noah didn't know, what he had no way of knowing, was that in the time it took him to walk from Evelyn's office to the server room, his old life had noticed him again. It happened the way those things always happened, quietly with no announcement. A name running through a search that hadn't been run in 3 years. A flag in a database that had been dormant since he'd walked out of a government office in Arlington, Virginia, and gotten on a train and not looked back. Someone in an air-conditioned room far from Cross Tower typing 3 words into a system and getting back results they hadn't expected. Noah Mercer. Active employment. Cross Tower, Manhattan. The person reading those results leaned forward in their chair and picked up a phone. At 2:30 in the afternoon on the 73rd floor of Cross Tower, Noah was deep in a working session with Chen and Voss, when his personal cell phone, not the work number, his personal cell, the one almost nobody had received a text from, a number he hadn't seen in 3 years. He looked at it under the table, read it once, read it again. Boy. The text said, "We need to talk, not a request. Old friends from Arlington, you know which ones. We know where you are." He set the phone face down on his knee. Above the table, his face showed nothing. Noah. Chen was pointing at a section of code on the shared screen. This abstraction layer here, you said the issue might run deeper than the migration code. Are we looking at the original system design? Noah looked at the screen. He looked at it with the full attention the question deserved, and when he answered, his voice was the same voice he'd used all day, even specific, completely unhurried. Yes, he said. Pull up the original design spec. Let's find out how far down it goes. But under the table, his hand was very still on the phone. And somewhere behind his eyes, in a part of him that the gray uniform and the Tuesday grilled cheese and the crayon drawing on the fridge had not entirely reached, something had gone quiet and alert. The same something that had kept him alive in rooms much darker than this one. The clock on the wall said 2:33 p.m. It was going to be a very different kind of afternoon. He didn't text back. Right, that was the first decision, and it was made in under 2 seconds. With the same economy he applied to everything that mattered. You didn't respond to that kind of contact on their terms and their timeline. You didn't confirm you'd received it, didn't confirm the number still worked, didn't hand them the small advantage of knowing they'd landed. He flipped the phone over screen down and kept his eyes on Chen's monitor. The original design spec, Noah said. How far back does it go? Chen pulled it up. 18 months. This was built in-house before the Meridian contract was formalized. Who built it? Team of 4. 2 of them are still here. Voss was one of them. Team of High. Voss at the end of the table looked up from his printout. He had the expression of a man who had already arrived at the same conclusion Noah was working toward, and was waiting to see if Noah would get there cleanly. The abstraction problem was mine, he said. I knew it when I wrote it. Deadline was in 36 hours, and we made a call. I'm not here to assign blame, Noah said. I'm not here to. I know, Voss said. I'm telling you so you know where to look. The problem runs through my layers. I can tell you exactly which ones. Noah looked at him for a moment. He had a specific kind of respect for men who said the hard true thing without being asked and without performing remorse. Okay, he said. Walk me through them. They worked for 90 minutes straight. No breaks, no digressions. The focused velocity of people who understand that the clock matters and have collectively decided to respect that. Voss talked. Noah listened and mapped. Chen caught the implications in real time and started flagging the repair points in the code. Park ran diagnostics in parallel. Reyes tracked the network dependencies. At 4:08 p.m. Noah looked at the complete picture of what they were dealing with for the first time, the full scope of the structural flaw laid out across 3 screens. Every layer Voss had built under pressure 18 months ago. Every point where the foundation had been asked to carry weight it wasn't designed for. It was worse than he'd thought. Not catastrophically worse, but worse. 8 weeks, he said. Chen looked up. Not 3 or 4. The rebuild is 8 weeks minimum if we're doing it right, which we are. He looked at Chen. You need to tell Evelyn before I do. Why me? Because you're her IT lead, and this is your assessment as much as mine. She needs to hear it from the team that's going to execute the fix. Not just the consultant she hired 2 days ago. Chen held his gaze for a moment. Then he nodded, picked up his phone and called Priya. Tell Ms. Cross we need 15 minutes. Today before 5. He got the 15 minutes at 4:30. The meeting was in the small conference room adjacent to Evelyn's office. Not the office itself, a signal Noah read correctly, as meaning she was treating it as a working meeting rather than a power meeting. Chen led it. Noah sat to his left. Voss was there. Webb dialed in from another floor. Chen delivered the assessment cleanly. He didn't over-explain, didn't hedge excessively, didn't bury the number. 8 weeks. Full structural rebuild of the foundation layers. Migration paused, pending completion of Phase 1. When he finished, the room was quiet. Evelyn looked at the table for 3 seconds. Then she looked at Voss. You knew about the abstraction flaw when you built it. Yes, Voss said. And you didn't flag it. I made a deadline call. I was wrong too. He said it the same way he'd said it to Noah, flat clean, not performing anything. I've been wrong about it for 18 months. Evelyn looked at him for a long moment. Noah watched her face the way the quality of her attention moved through several things before settling. He'd expected anger. He'd expected the version of her that had pointed at him in this same corridor 2 days ago. What he got instead was something harder to categorize. She looked at Voss the way you look at something when you're deciding what it actually is. You're the most experienced systems architect on this floor, she said. Yes. And the only person in this building who could lead a rebuild of your own foundation layers from the inside. Voss understood what she was doing. Yes, then that's what you're doing. She looked at Chen. Timeline stands at 8 weeks. I want a milestone report every 72 hours, not a summary actual progress markers, deliverables. She looked at Noah last. You stay on through the rebuild. Agreed, Noah said. She nodded once and stood. The meeting was over. As people gathered their things, she said to the room in general, I'm calling Meridian's board at 6. I'll need the full technical brief from Noah and Chen by 5:30. She walked out. Noah checked the time. 4:47 p.m. 5:30. He could do that. He was back at his workstation at 4:49, drafting the technical brief with the focused efficiency of a man who had learned to write clearly, under time pressure, in circumstances considerably more stressful than this one. Chen worked alongside him, adding the operational context that Noah's section needed to make sense to a non-technical board. At 5:22 p.m., 8 minutes ahead of the deadline, Noah sent the brief to Priya and stood up. He looked at his phone. The text from the unknown Arlington number was still there face down in his memory, unacknowledged but not forgotten. He'd been carrying it all afternoon the way you carry a stone in your shoe, present specific waiting. He picked up his jacket, said a short goodbye to Chen and Park, and walked to the elevator. He took the executive elevator down. Still felt slightly wrong, the speed and the silence and the smell of nothing. He wondered how long it would take before it felt normal. He suspected it never entirely would, and that this was probably fine. He came out through the front entrance. The evening air hit him cooler than the afternoon, the particular quality of New York City at day's end, when the light goes lateral and the streets change register. He stood on the sidewalk for a moment, then stepped to the side away from the flow of foot traffic and took out his phone. He called the Arlington number. It rang once. I didn't expect you to call, said the voice on the other end. Male mid-50s, a voice that carried the slight flatness of someone who had spent a career communicating in controlled environments. Texting seemed too easy for you. What do you want, Garrett? A pause. Not uncomfortable. Garrett didn't do uncomfortable. Just the pause of a man who had decided how he was going to say what he was going to say. There's a situation. There's always a situation. This one has your name on it, literally. Another pause. The system you're rebuilding at Cross Systems. The Meridian migration. Noah went very still on the sidewalk. The city continued around him indifferent. Talk. What? Meridian Health Networks processes records for 11 hospital systems. What you probably don't know is that 3 of those systems have federal contracts. DoD Medical. The migration wasn't just a commercial deal, Noah. It's carrying classified patient data for active military personnel and their families. The implications assembled themselves in Noah's mind with the speed and clarity of a man whose brain had been trained to do exactly that kind of assembly. And the structural flaw makes that data vulnerable in ways that go beyond a hospital network going offline. Garrett's voice stayed flat. We've been watching the migration for 6 weeks. We flagged the flaw ourselves through different means. We were preparing to intervene. And then I showed up. And then you showed up. And in 48 hours you found what our analysts took 6 weeks to flag, and you've already got a rebuild team mobilized. A short pause that might have been the closest Garrett got to warmth. You always were faster than the room. What do you want? Noah said again. His voice was the same as it always was, level, unhurried. But something underneath it had shifted. The quiet, alert thing from the afternoon had sharpened. We want you to stay on the project, Garrett said. Officially as a consultant, unofficially with a specific brief, make sure the rebuild addresses the security architecture, not just the structural flaw. There are 3 additional vulnerabilities in the data handling layer that your team hasn't found yet. We need them fixed before this goes live. Send me the vulnerabilities. It's not that simple. It is that simple, Noah said. You have the technical data on 3 specific vulnerabilities in a system I'm already rebuilding. Send them to me. I'll integrate them into the rebuild spec, and they get fixed along with everything else. The data is classified. Then declassify the relevant portions, or have someone read them to me over a secure line. I don't need the context, I need the technical detail. He paused. What's the actual reason you're making this complicated, Garrett? Silence. There's more, Noah said. There's more, Garrett confirmed. Noah waited. The vulnerability wasn't accidental, Garrett said. The data handling layer with the 3 exposures, it was modified, deliberately, 8 months after Voss built the original foundation. Noah stood very still. Modified by who? Someone on the inside. We don't have a name yet. We have a method and a timeline and a profile. A pause. We need eyes in that building, Noah. Someone who's already there. Someone who can move around that floor without raising flags. You want me to work a counterintelligence operation from inside a consulting role. I want you to tell me if you see anything that matches the profile we're going to send you. And if I do, you call me. You don't act on it. You call me and we handle it. Noah looked out at the street for a long moment. He thought about Chen, about Voss, who had just put his own failure on the table in a conference room without flinching. About Park with his 3 years of experience and his genuine excitement when a diagnosis landed right. About the team he'd spent 2 days learning the shape of. He thought about Emma. He thought about Delancey Street and Tuesday grilled cheese and crayon drawings of a man with yellow hair. If I find something, he said, I tell you, I don't run an operation, I don't go dark, I don't disappear from Emma's life because a situation escalated. Those are my terms. Understood. If at any point the situation requires anything that takes me away from being home by 8 p.m., the arrangement ends. No exceptions. That's a tight operational window, Noah. That's my window. Garrett was quiet for a moment. Then, agreed. Send me the vulnerability profiles on a secure line. Tonight. Tonight. A pause. Noah, it's good to hear your voice. Send the data, Garrett. He hung up. He stood on the sidewalk for another 30 seconds. The stone in his shoe had become something heavier, but the weight was familiar. He'd carried heavier. The important thing, the thing he'd learned at considerable cost over 15 years and 3 years of deliberate unlearning, was that you could carry something without letting it carry you. He started walking toward the subway. At 6:14 p.m., he walked through the door of the apartment on Delancey Street. Emma was at the kitchen table doing math homework, her pencil moving with the forceful confidence of a child who has decided she likes numbers. She looked up when he came in. You're early, she said. 6 minutes. That's still early. She considered this. Ms. Pettigrew said I should practice the recorder every day, even when there's no concert. She's right. I practiced for 20 minutes before you got home. I know, Mrs. Alvarez texted me. Emma made a face that meant she was aware of the neighborhood surveillance network that surrounded her and was resigned to it. Did she say I was good? She said you were enthusiastic. That means loud. It means you care, Noah said. He put his jacket over the chair and started opening cabinets. Pasta tonight. Tuesdays are grilled cheese, Wednesdays are pasta. Can we have the one with the butter and the cheese, not the sauce? Cacio e pepe, the one you have to say in Italian. Yes. He filled the pot with water. How was school? She launched into it the full account with all the relevant personnel and their actions and her assessments of those actions, and he listened, the way he always listened, completely tracking every name and relationship, storing it with the same precision he'd been trained to store operational details because it mattered this much and more. While she talked, and while the water heated, and while the apartment filled with the particular warmth of early evening domesticity, his phone buzzed once in his pocket. He didn't look at it. He knew what it was. He looked at Emma instead. Yellow crayon hair and the forceful pencil, and the slightly dramatic way she described things that had happened to her, which she had gotten from him and which he would never tell her, because it would delight her too much. "Daddy," she said with the tone of a child pivoting to something she'd been building toward for a while. "Are you going to be at a new job now?" He looked at her. "How do you know about a new job?" "Mrs. Alvarez said you were wearing nicer pants today." He almost laughed. Almost. "Yes," he said. "A new job. Same building, different work." "Do you like it?" "Meh." He thought about it honestly. About Chen's face when the diagnosis landed. About Voss's quiet admission in the conference room. About the number with the commas and the contract folded in his shirt pocket, and the unsent text from an Arlington number, and the 3 classified vulnerabilities arriving on a secure line sometime tonight. "Yes," he said. "I think I do." "Is it safe?" The question landed with the particular weight that only a child's direct questions can carry, unfiltered, unstrategic, just the thing she actually wanted to know. He looked at her pencil on the math homework, at the careful numbers she'd written. "Yes," he said, "it's safe." She nodded, satisfied, and went back to her homework. He turned back to the stove. The secure message from Garrett arrived at 9:47 p.m. after Emma was asleep and the apartment had settled into its nighttime quiet. He read it at the kitchen table with a glass of water and no lights except the lamp in the corner. 3 vulnerabilities, precisely described. The kind of technical specificity that came from someone who had spent real time inside the system architecture, not probing from outside, but working from inside knowledge. The modifications were elegant in the way that malicious things sometimes were built to be invisible under standard review, designed to activate under specific load conditions that wouldn't occur until the system was fully live. But whoever had done this knew exactly what they were doing. They'd had access, they'd had time, they'd had technical capability that matched or exceeded Voss's. And they were almost certainly still in the building. He read the profile Garrett had sent. 3 pages, method, timeline, behavioral indicators, technical signature. He read it twice the way he read everything that mattered. Then he sat with a glass of water and the quiet apartment and thought. He was thinking about one specific thing. One detail from the past 2 days that he hadn't assigned weight to yet because at the time it hadn't been the relevant thing. But it was relevant now. On the first morning when Chen had been working the software diagnosis, he'd said something. A small thing. He'd said the system had been stable until a specific stress event cracked it open. He'd said it the way you say something that you know, not inferred, not analytical. Known. Noah had filed it at the time as familiarity with the system. Chen had been working with it for months. But there was a difference between knowing how a system behaves under stress and knowing when a specific stress event would crack it open. He sat with that for a long time. Then he put the phone down and went to check on Emma. She was asleep on her side, one arm around the stuffed rabbit that was missing an eye, breathing the deep and uncomplicated breath of a child with no weight on her. He stood in the doorway for a moment, just a moment. Then he went back to the kitchen, picked up the secure phone, and typed a single message to Garrett. It said, "I need the full access logs for the Meridian architecture for the past 18 months. Every login, every modification, every timestamp." The reply came in 4 minutes. It was a single word. Incoming. He made coffee. It was going to be a long night. But there was a wall between this kitchen and the world that ran through the nighttime hours on the other side of Emma's door. And he would hold it the same way he held everything that mattered. With both hands. Without letting go. At 11:52 p.m., 73 pages of access logs open on his laptop, he found the first timestamp that didn't match. It was small, barely visible in the data. A login that had occurred at 3:17 a.m. on a Tuesday in October 8 months ago from an internal credentials set that was assigned to a member of the original build team. A build team member who, according to the building access records Garrett had also sent, had not been in the building that night. Someone had used stolen credentials. Someone who knew exactly where to go in the system, exactly what to change, exactly how to make it invisible. Noah set his coffee down, looked at the screen. The name on the credential set stared back at him from the access log with the blankness of pure data carrying no intention and no guilt. Just the mechanical record of what had happened. He knew that name. He'd sat across a table from that person for 2 days. His hand was very still on the laptop keys. Outside the apartment window, the city was doing what it did at midnight, running quieter, but never actually quiet. The permanent restless murmur of 10 million lives conducting themselves in parallel, indifferent to the specific gravity of what was happening at a kitchen table on Delancey Street. He picked up the secure phone. His thumb was over Garrett's number. And then he stopped, again because something else had occurred to him. Something the access log alone couldn't answer. Something that the past 2 days of watching a team work under pressure had seeded in the back of his mind, without his fully knowing it. What if the stolen credentials hadn't been stolen at all? What if the person whose name was on the log had put them there deliberately, not to hide their own access, but to frame someone else's? He sat with that for 3 minutes, turned it over the way you turn over something sharp, carefully from different angles, making sure you understand what you're holding before you decide what to do with it. Then he put the phone down, without calling Garrett, and opened the access logs from a different angle. He started looking for what wasn't there. Because in his experience, 15 years of it, the kind that didn't go on a resume, the most important thing in a system log was never what had been recorded. It was what should have been recorded and wasn't. The absence, the gap, the clean space where a careful person had made sure to leave nothing. He found it at 1:23 a.m. A 7-minute window in the logs, 8 months ago, 3 days after the Tuesday credentials entry, where the system had continued to run with full functionality and 0 access records. 7 minutes of a live system operating with nobody logged in, which was technically and architecturally impossible. Unless someone had accessed the logging system itself and removed the record of their presence, which required a level of system access that was not assigned to the person whose credentials appeared on Tuesday's log. It required administrative access, the kind held by exactly 3 people in cross-systems IT infrastructure. He pulled up the org chart Priya had sent him as part of his onboarding documentation, found the section on system administration, read the 3 names. His eyes stopped on the second one. He sat very still for a long moment. The coffee was cold. The apartment was quiet. From the bedroom down the hall came the soft, undisturbed sound of a child sleeping without worry. He picked up the secure phone. This time he dialed. Garrett answered on the second ring, the voice of a man who had been awake and waiting. "Tell me." "I need you to run a financial profile," Noah said. "Full spectrum, past 24 months. He gave the name. "Tonight." Silence on the line. Then, "That's an executive level." "I know who it is," Noah said. "Run it tonight, Garrett, because if I'm right, the person who built the vulnerability into that system isn't a low-level insider. They're sitting in a position where they could have watched the Meridian contract develop from the beginning, influenced the timeline, and selected the precise moment to introduce the flaw." He paused. "And if I'm right, they're going to know that a rebuild is coming, and they're going to move before we close the window." The silence on the line was the silence of a man recalculating the size of the thing he was holding. "How confident are you?" Noah looked at the screen, at the 7-minute gap in the logs, at the name on the org chart, at the shape of 2 days of data assembling itself into a picture he hadn't been looking for and couldn't now unsee. "Confident enough to call you at 1 in the morning, he said. Garrett exhaled. "I'll have the financial profile by 6 a.m. "Good." Noah closed the laptop. "And Garrett, nobody moves until I say so. This needs to be clean. There's a team of good people in that building who don't deserve collateral damage." "Understood." "I mean it." "I know you do," Garrett said. "That's always been the thing about you, Noah. You always mean it." He hung up, sat in the quiet kitchen for a moment. Then he got up, rinsed the coffee cup, turned off the lamp, and went to check on Emma one more time before he tried to sleep. She hadn't moved. Still on her side, still holding the one-eyed rabbit, still breathing that deep, uncomplicated breath. He stood in the doorway for longer than a moment this time. The job he'd signed a contract for was finding a structural flaw in a piece of migration code. He'd found it. He'd built a team to fix it. He'd negotiated his hours and redirected a bonus, and said the hard true thing in a conference room and meant every word of it. What he hadn't signed the contract for was any of what was coming next, but he'd learned over years and at significant cost that the work you sign for and the work that matters are not always the same thing. And the work that matters doesn't wait for the right paperwork. He went to bed at 2:09 a.m. At 5:58 a.m., 4 minutes before Garrett's promised delivery, his phone lit up on the nightstand. He was already awake. He read the financial profile in 6 minutes. When he put the phone down, he lay on his back for exactly 30 seconds, staring at the ceiling in the pre-dawn dark. Then he was up. Same as always. No stretching, no groaning. Just up. He had a full day ahead of him, and the shape of it had changed overnight into something that required everything he had, every version of himself, the ones he'd shown, and the ones he'd kept quiet, and the one that existed in the space between the gray uniform and the classified 15 years. He made coffee. He packed Emma's lunch. He wrote a note for Mrs. Alvarez on the counter. He put on the dark slacks and the plain white shirt and looked at himself in the bathroom mirror for 3 seconds, the look of a man taking inventory. Then he walked out the door and into whatever the day was going to be. The financial profile on Harrison Webb was 41 pages long, and it told a story that nobody in Crosstower had been meant to read. Noah read it on the subway. Standing, one hand on the overhead bar phone, held low, the document scrolling with the unhurried pace of a man who was reading carefully and not showing it. Around him, the morning commute did what it always did. Pressed in close, breathed, stared at screens, conducted itself with the particular anonymous exhaustion of people who had somewhere to be and not quite enough time to get there. Nobody looked at him. He was still furniture to most of the world. That was fine. That was useful. Webb's financial picture was clean on the surface, the way a house can be clean on the surface. Everything in order, everything where it should be, until you looked at the foundation. 3 offshore accounts in the past 20 months. Not large transfers individually, each one under the reporting threshold, the kind of disciplined pattern that someone had taught him or that he'd taught himself. But in aggregate across 20 months, the total moved was significant. More than a COO's salary explained. More than investments or inheritance or any of the clean explanations you'd reach for first.
Sure is.
The timing was what sealed it. The first transfer had occurred 11 days after the Meridian contract was signed. The second 4 days after the access log showed the credentials entry. The most recent 2 weeks ago, right around the time the server failure had cascaded and the structural flaw had come close enough to the surface that a careful person might have decided the window for resolution was narrowing. Someone had paid Harrison Webb to plant a vulnerability in a system carrying classified military medical data. Someone had been paying him for 20 months to make sure that vulnerability survived long enough to be exploited. Noah put his phone in his pocket as the subway pulled into his stop. He walked the 7 minutes to Crosstower in the pale morning light and thought about what he knew and what he still needed to understand before he moved. He needed to know who was paying Webb. He needed to know what the exploitation window looked like when the vulnerability was designed to activate and what it was designed to deliver. And he needed to do all of this without tipping Webb, who was smart enough and careful enough to have stayed invisible for 20 months, and who would recognize the change in air pressure if Noah came in wrong. He walked through the front entrance of Crosstower at 7:47 a.m. The lobby staff knew him now 3 days in, and he was already a known variable, which was its own kind of information about how quickly people calibrated to presence. He nodded to the woman at the center desk, took the executive elevator, and rode up to 73, with the plan assembling itself in the ordered way, plans assembled when you had all the relevant variables, and had slept on them. He had most of what he needed. He was missing one piece. He found it before he reached the server room. Priya was coming toward him down the corridor at 7:49 with the tablet and the coffee and the particular energy she carried every morning that was professional efficiency and barely contained anxiety in roughly equal measure. She handed him the coffee. Without being asked, she'd learned his preference on day 2 and said, "Good morning. Ms. Cross wants you at 8:30 for a check-in on the rebuild timeline. I'll be there." Priya, who authorized Webb's access to the Meridian architecture specs, original authorization before the build team was assembled. She looked up from the tablet. The question was specific enough and the delivery calm enough that she processed it as a routine administrative inquiry. That would have been Ms. Cross. All contract architecture access goes through her office. And Webb his IT access level. Who manages that? IT administration. Chen's team. Who specifically? She checked the tablet. System admin access is managed by the lead sysadmin. That's Daniel Reyes. She paused. He's Reyes's husband, actually. They're in different departments. It's disclosed. It's never been an issue. It's not an issue now, Noah said. Thank you. He walked on toward the server room. Behind him, Priya stood in the corridor for a moment with her tablet, the slight frown of someone who has answered a question and is now retroactively wondering what it was really asking. The server room at 7:52 a.m. had the density of a team that had been in motion since early. Chen was at his station. Park was running a diagnostic sequence. Voss was at the whiteboard he'd claimed on day 1, the rebuild architecture mapped out across it in the dense, precise shorthand of a systems architect working through something that mattered to him. Reyes was at the network rack, her back to the room focused. Noah stood in the doorway for 3 seconds and looked at all of it. Then he walked to Chen's station. "I need 5 minutes," he said quietly. "Not in here." Chen looked at him, read whatever was in Noah's face that was different from the previous 2 days. He stood without asking why and followed Noah into the corridor. They went to the small utility room 2 doors down. The kind of room that every large floor has full of supplies and equipment overlooked because it's useful rather than prestigious. Noah closed the door. "I'm going to tell you something," Noah said, "and I need you to hear all of it before you react." Chen crossed his arms. His face was careful. "Okay." Noah told him. Clean and fast, the credentials entry, the 7-minute log gap, the financial profile, Webb's offshore accounts, the timing against the Meridian contract milestones. He didn't editorialize. He gave Chen the facts in the order that made them most comprehensible. When he finished, Chen was very still. "Harrison Webb," he said. "Not a question. The way you say a name when you're trying to make it fit a shape it didn't previously occupy." "Yes. He's been here 11 years. "I know. He gave the keynote at our company anniversary dinner last spring. He talked about integrity." A short pause that carried something complicated. "He was good. People cried." Chen. "I know." He uncrossed his arms, pressed his palms flat against the surface beside him, the physical gesture of a man steadying himself. "What do you need from me? I need you to go back in that room and work exactly the way you've been working. Normal, no change. Can you do that?" "Yes." "And I need you to know that Reyes is not part of this. Her husband manages Webb's admin access. Webb used that proximity as a resource. She didn't know." Something moved in Chen's face. He'd been going to ask. Noah had seen it forming. "You're sure?" The access log gaps required admin clearance. Reyes doesn't have admin clearance, only her husband does, and his credentials show no anomalous activity. Webb found a way to access the admin tools through a vulnerability in the credential handoff that had nothing to do with Reyes. Chen exhaled. "Okay." He straightened. "What are you going to do?" "I'm going to go to the 8:30 meeting with Evelyn and tell her." In front of Webb. Webb will be at the 8:30 meeting. He's at every executive check-in. Noah held Chen's gaze. I'm going to tell her with him in the room. I need her to hear it in real time without warning so that her reaction is genuine and uncoached. And I need Webb to not have had time to prepare a story. Chen looked at him for a long moment. That's either very good or very dangerous. It's both, Noah said. Go back to work. This will be over before noon. He said it with the same quality. He said everything level-specific, unhurried. Chen looked at him for one more second, with the expression of a man who was understanding perhaps for the first time the full dimension of what he'd been sitting next to for 3 days. Then he nodded and went back to the server room. Noah took out his secure phone and texted Garrett. 2 words. Conference room, 8:30. Then he sent the building address and the floor number and put the phone away. Bang. He had 36 minutes. He used 20 of them sitting at his workstation reviewing the access logs one more time from a different angle, not looking for new evidence, but mapping the sequence of events against the Meridian migration timeline. He was building the picture he would present in the meeting, the kind of picture that was clear and complete, and left no available exit. At 8:12 he went to find Evelyn. She was in her office, standing at her desk, reviewing the brief he and Chen had sent the night before in preparation for the board call. She looked up when he came in, read his face the same way Chen had a quick, precise read, the kind that only people who pay real attention are capable of. Something shifted in her expression. Close the door, she said. He did. Tell me. He told her. Same structure as Chen, clean, fast, fact by fact. He watched her face while he talked. She was very still, the way she'd been still when he'd told her the migration needed to stop. But this was a different quality of stillness. That had been a business problem. This was something else. When he finished, she said, Harrison. Yes. 11 years. I know. She turned away from him for a moment. Toward the window, the city doing its morning thing behind the glass. Her hands were at her sides, perfectly still, and he could see from the set of her shoulders the specific effort of a woman keeping the full weight of a thing from landing on her face before she was ready. He sat in this office yesterday, she said. He told me the Meridian situation was being handled well. He said... She stopped. He said he thought you were a valuable addition to the team. Noah said nothing. She turned back. Her face was composed now the way you compose a face when you've decided that the feeling can wait. What do you need from me? I need the 8:30 meeting to go forward as scheduled. I need Webb in the room. And I need you to let me run the opening 5 minutes. You're going to confront him in the meeting. I'm going to give him the opportunity to make a choice. In front of witnesses. He paused. There are people coming from outside the building. My contact from Arlington. He'll be in position by 8:30. Her eyes narrowed. Arlington. You said government contractor. I did. That wasn't the complete picture. No, he said. It wasn't. She held his gaze. The gray eyes doing the thing they did, working through multiple things, simultaneously processing and filing and deciding. You knew this building was carrying a federal security interest when you took the consulting role. I found out on day 2, he said, after I signed the contract. And you stayed. The structural flaw needed fixing regardless. The security issue made it more urgent, not less. He held her gaze. I wasn't running an operation in your building, Evelyn. I was fixing a system, and I found something I couldn't unfind. There's a difference. She was quiet for a moment. Then, you called me Evelyn. He paused. He had. First time. He hadn't decided to. It had come out of the weight of the conversation, the specific gravity of standing in someone's office at 8 in the morning, telling them that a person they'd trusted for 11 years had betrayed them. Ms. Cross, he said. No. Something moved in her face. Not quite a smile. Somewhere in the vicinity of one. Evelyn is fine. She straightened. 8:30. You run the first 5 minutes. The conference room at 8:28 had 6 people in it. Chen, who had done exactly what Noah asked and showed up with his normal expression and his normal coffee and nothing else visible. Webb, who arrived at 8:27 with the ease of a man who had been attending executive meetings for 11 years and found them comfortable. Priya at the corner with her tablet. 2 members of the legal team who handled the Meridian contract present for the timeline update. Shotin. And at 8:29, 2 men Noah recognized from Arlington arrived with building security and stood at the back of the room with the particular stillness of people who were present in a specific professional capacity and not making conversation about it. Webb noticed them. Noah watched him notice them, the small, precise flicker of attention, the quarter-second recalibration, and then the deliberate return to neutral. He was good. He'd been good for 20 months. Evelyn came in at exactly 8:30 and sat at the head of the table. She looked at Noah. He stood. "Before we cover the rebuild timeline," he said, "I need to address something that affects the security architecture of the entire Meridian project." He looked at the table at the faces arranged around it. He let his gaze move to Webb last and stay there. "Last night I reviewed the full access logs for the Meridian architecture going back 18 months. I found a credentials entry from October, a login at 3:17 a.m. internal credentials for a build team member who wasn't in the building that night." Yeah. The room was quiet. Webb's face was neutral, professionally, completely, impressively neutral. "I also found a 7-minute gap in the access logs 3 days later. A live system with 0 access records, which is architecturally impossible unless someone accessed the logging system itself to remove their presence." He paused. "That requires administrative clearance. 3 people in this building have administrative clearance." He named 2 of them. He didn't name Webb. No. He let the omission sit in the room for 3 seconds. Then he put the financial profile on the table. Printed 41 pages slid to the center where everyone could see the header page with the account numbers and the transfer history and the dates that aligned one after another with Meridian contract milestones. "The third person with administrative clearance," Noah said, "has received payments totaling just under $800,000 across 20 offshore accounts in the past 20 months. The first payment arrived 11 days after the merited contract was signed." He looked at Webb. Webb looked back at him. The neutral face held for 2 more seconds, the impressive, trained, deeply practiced, neutral face of a man who had spent 11 years learning to be trusted. Then something happened underneath it, some structural support giving way, and the face changed. Not to guilt, not immediately, first to something colder. The look of a man who has been outmaneuvered and knows it and is running the remaining options. "This is an extraordinary accusation," Webb said. His voice was steady. 11 years of boardrooms, his voice was still steady. "Based on what exactly a maintenance contractor with a government contact and access to financial data he shouldn't have?" "Based on 41 pages of documented transfers," Noah said, "and a 7-minute gap in your access logs on October 19th. "I want legal counsel before this conversation continues." "You can have it," Noah said. "The gentlemen at the back of the room are federal. They have a warrant. Counsel is your right, and you should exercise it." He paused. "But before they take you out of this room, I want to ask you one question, not for them, for the people at this table." Webb looked at him, the cold calculations still running behind his eyes. "Why Meridian?" Noah said. "There were other contracts, other systems. You could have chosen something that didn't carry military medical records. Soldiers' families. Kids who grew up in base housing and saw their parents come home from deployments and needed the system to work when they went to the hospital." He let it sit for a moment. Why that system? The room was completely silent. The room. Something happened in Webb's face that was different from everything before it. Not remorse exactly. Not the performed variety. Something more raw than that, the brief, involuntary expression of a man who has been asked the question he has not been asking himself and finds it unexpectedly unanswerable. He said nothing. The 2 men from Arlington stepped forward. It took 4 minutes. Clean professional, no drama, the absence of drama being its own kind of statement about how thoroughly the situation had been prepared for. Webb walked out of the conference room with the specific posture of a man who had decided that whatever happened next, he would not give the room the satisfaction of watching him fall apart. The door closed behind them. The conference room held its breath. Then Chen said quietly to nobody in particular, 11 years. Evelyn Cross sat at the head of the table with both hands flat on the surface looking at the door. Her face was composed. Her hands were completely still. From where Noah stood, he could see the specific quality of control. It was taking the architecture of a person who had built their entire professional life on not letting the room see them absorb a blow. "Ms. Cross," he said. She looked at him. "The rebuild is still on track," he said. "The 3 vulnerabilities Webb introduced are documented. We can integrate the fixes into the existing rebuild spec and add approximately 4 days to the timeline. Chen's team can handle it." She looked at him for a long moment. 4 days. 4 days. She looked at Chen. "Can you do it?" "Yes," Chen said without hesitation. She nodded. She looked back at the door one more time. Then she looked at her hands on the table as if confirming they were still. Then she picked up the brief in front of her and made a note in the margin with her pen. "Then let's talk about the timeline," she said. Noah sat down. The meeting ran 40 minutes and covered the rebuild milestones, the revised delivery date, the communication plan for Meridian's board, and the security audit that would run parallel to the technical rebuild. It was conducted with the focused efficiency of people who have just watched something destabilizing and have collectively chosen to demonstrate that they are not destabilized by it. Noah spoke when he had something specific to add, and not otherwise. He watched the team Chen anchoring the technical discussion, Voss contributing the deep architectural knowledge, Reyes handling the network security piece, with a precise clarity that spoke to how good she actually was when the situation required it. Park in the corner, keeping the notes with the attentiveness of someone who understood that what they were participating in was larger than a meeting. Bang! It was, he thought, a good team. It had been a good team before he arrived. It had needed one piece of information it didn't have. That was all most good things needed. After the meeting, when the room had emptied and Priya had collected the materials and the legal team had taken the financial profile for evidentiary purposes, Evelyn Cross stayed at the table. Noah was gathering his laptop and his notes when she spoke. "Stay a minute," she said. He stayed. She looked at the table for a moment. Not at him, at the table at the specific spot where the financial profile had been. Then she looked up. "When you walked off that freight elevator 3 days ago," she said, "I looked at your name patch. I know. I was dismissive. You were. I've been turning that over." She met his gaze directly. "I've been dismissive with a lot of people, over a long time. I've told myself it was efficiency, that I don't have the bandwidth for everyone, that decisions about where to invest attention are a resource management problem." She paused. "That's a story I told myself." Noah looked at her. "Why are you telling me this?" "Because you've been straight with me since the first morning," she said. "You told me I had 2 minutes when I was trying to intimidate you. You told me the migration needed to stop, when it would have been easier to fix the visible problem and let the invisible one stay invisible. You told me about Webb, when you could have just passed the information to your Arlington contact and let them handle it without ever involving me directly." She stopped. "Why?" He thought about it honestly. "Because it was your building," he said. "Your team. Your decision to make. Taking it away from you because I could have managed it without you would have been the same thing you did to me in the corridor that first morning." She was quiet. "You assessed me by the category I appeared to belong to," he said. "I wasn't going to do that to you." The silence that followed was the longest one they'd shared. Outside the glass, the city was at full morning volume, the particular dense energy of a workday in motion, 10,000 decisions being made per block per minute. Inside the conference room, it was quiet enough to hear the ventilation. "I had a daughter," Evelyn said. Noah went still. She was 3. Her voice was even the evenness of a long-practiced containment. A car accident. 7 years ago. She would have been Emma's age. She looked at the table again. When you mentioned Emma in my office the first day, I want you to know that's not why I offered you the contract. I want to be clear about that. I know, Noah said. But it is why I hoped she nailed the recorder part. He looked at her for a long moment. Evelyn Cross, sitting at the head of a conference table in a building that bore her name, the most feared woman in American business, telling him something she told almost nobody with the same flat directness she brought to everything, because she had apparently decided he was someone she could tell it to. She nailed it, he said. Something happened in Evelyn Cross's face that had nothing to do with business. It came and went in the space of 2 seconds. But it was real. It was completely, unperformedly real. Good, she said. Then she straightened, pulled the remaining documents toward her, and picked up her pen. Back to work. That was who she was, and he respected it. He picked up his laptop. At the door he paused, picked up his. For what it's worth, he said. The first morning, the 2 minutes thing. I wasn't trying to challenge you. She looked up. I was just telling you what time it was, he said. She held his gaze for a moment. Then she made a note on the document in front of her. I know, she said. That's what bothered me. He walked out. The rebuild took 9 weeks, not 8. 4 days for the web vulnerabilities, 3 additional days for a secondary abstraction issue Voss found when he got deep into the foundation layers and decided in the manner of a man making peace with a thing he'd been avoiding to do it completely right. Chen led the technical execution. Voss rebuilt his own layers from the ground up with a precision and commitment that had the quality of a man correcting something he should have corrected 18 months ago. Park wrote documentation so thorough that Reyes told him it was the best she'd seen in 6 years in the industry. Reyes herself rebuilt the network security architecture with her husband's administrative access properly structured and documented, the proximity that Webb had exploited now converted into a transparent and formally managed process. Noah was there every day. He was done at 5:30 every day. He did not miss Emma's dinner once. But Garrett's people prosecuted the Webb case with the quiet, methodical efficiency of an agency that had been watching for 20 months and had what it needed. The buyer, the entity that had been paying Webb to ensure the vulnerability survived long enough to be activated, was a foreign intelligence operation that had spent 4 years mapping American military medical infrastructure. The case would not be in the news for another year, and when it was, the names involved would be redacted and the technical details classified, and the story the public would read would be a version of events that was accurate in outline and entirely silent about a consulting contractor named Noah Mercer, who had found the thread by reading an access log at 1 a.m. in a kitchen on Delancey Street. That was fine. Noah had never needed his name in a story. The Meridian migration went live on a Tuesday, which felt Noah thought somehow appropriate. Clean stable, all nodes nominal. The hospital networks came online one by one over a 48-hour window, the data handoffs executing with the smooth precision of a system that had been built correctly from the foundation up by people who had done the hard thing instead of the easy one. Chen called Noah at 7:15 that morning before he'd left the apartment to tell him the first network had gone live without incident. Stable, Noah asked. Completely stable. A pause. The sound of a man on the other end of a phone who had been awake for most of the previous 30 hours and was feeling perhaps for the first time in 9 weeks the specific relief of a thing done right. Thank you, Noah. You did the work, Noah said. You showed us where to look. Noah looked across the kitchen at Emma, who was eating cereal with the focused efficiency of a child who had somewhere to be in 45 minutes and had calculated her cereal consumption accordingly. She had the slightly damp look of someone who had showered without being told to, which was new and worth noting. That's the job, Noah said. He signed off with Chen and poured the last of his coffee into the travel cup. Emma looked up from her cereal. "Was that about your new work?" she said. "Yes." "Did something good happen?" He thought about it. About the 9 weeks of it, the midnight access logs and the conference room, and the look on Evelyn's face when the 2 men from Arlington walked Webb out, and the look on Chen's face when the migration went live, and the 9 weeks of Tuesday grilled cheese and Wednesday pasta, and Emma practicing the recorder with the enthusiastic volume that had made Mrs. Alvarez text him 3 times. "Something good happened," he said. She nodded with the satisfied finality of a child for whom this settled the matter. Then, "My braids are better now." He looked at her braids. He'd been practicing. They were, in fact, measurably better, still not expert. Probably never going to be expert, but better. Competent. Done with care, and the willingness to get it wrong until you got it less wrong. "They are," he said. She picked up her backpack and held out her hand. He took it. They walked out the door together into the morning, into the specific, ordinary miracle of a man and his daughter going about the business of their day, and that more than the classified case and the rebuilt system and the number with the multiple commas deposited cleanly in his account was the thing that mattered. The thing he'd built the wall to protect. The thing that had been worth every choice, every sacrifice, every version of himself he'd set aside, and every version he'd kept. He walked Emma to school. He kissed her on the top of her head at the gate. He watched her go through the door without looking back, 7 years old, and entirely unafraid, which was exactly how he intended to keep her. Then he turned and walked toward the subway, toward Cross Tower, toward the day's work, and the team that was waiting, and the system that was running clean and stable as it should have been from the beginning, as it would be from now on. He was Noah Mercer. He'd been furniture to the world for 3 years, and he'd been something else entirely underneath it, and he'd chosen both on purpose, and he would choose them again. Some men are defined by the titles they carry. Noah Mercer was defined by the promises he kept, the ones made in boardrooms, and the ones made at bedtime, the ones that appeared on contracts and the ones spoken quietly at a school gate on a Tuesday morning that meant more than any of the rest of it. Every one of them he kept. That was who he was. That was enough. That was everything.